Strong debuts for the Red Sox yesterday at spring training.
Fantastic.
I mean, Bregman 3 for 3.
Yep, dong.
Home run, double, single. Playing third base.
I was going to say, what position was he playing?
Third base,
Hot corner?
batting second.
Love it.
Like all of it. I love all of it. He's productive.
Amazing.
He's playing the right position.
Yep.
He's hitting in the right spot in the lineup. Like,
Keep him
check,
there.
check.
Keep him third base and have him hit second. I'd go Duran, Bregman, Devers.
Same. Whenever
Casas,
you get Devers.
Or Story, even if you want the righty-lefty, depending on the other team's bullpen and stuff like that.
I would hit Casas 4, but whatever. Like once you get to that point,
maybe ask him. He could probably tell you where he's going to hit.
That's a good point.
He's got a pretty good idea.
You can move those guys around, as you said, versus a righty and a lefty if you want to switch off. But that's personally how I would go. Duran, Bregman, Devers, whenever he's out there, Casas. But yesterday was like perfect. Check. 3 for 3, third base, batting second. Perfect.
Awesome.
Makes me feel a lot better about last week and all the back and forth and the bad blood and the comments about I want to play here and this guy should play there. It seems like Cora has a good idea, although Devers isn't out there yet.
Right.
So we got to see what it looks like when Devers actually gets out there, if Devers gets out there anytime soon. And then you have Crochet. He faces 5 batters. He mows down 4 of them.
Just throwing heat.
I mean, a lot of pitches and some base runners as well.
That's fine. I mean, it's spring training.
But
just
the
stuff.
The punch-outs were there. The stuff was there.
Yeah.
And so 2 great debuts for the Red Sox yesterday, which makes you kind of wonder how far this team can go.
I mean, this is why there's a lot of excitement. It's these 2 guys, right? So because when they got Bregman, we talked about how just on his own, like, yeah, Bregman's a nice player, but if you don't bring in an ace or like a potential number 1 starter, maybe one of the 3-4 best pitchers in the American League with the opportunity to have the best season out of all those guys, like, yeah, that's where all the excitement, I think, comes from. And then that combination, just to see them both go out there and perform right off the rip, it's like, all right, you feel pretty good because last year they were 500. Like, this isn't taking over a 4-win Patriots team. Like, last year they were 500. They had their issues, but they weren't bottom of the league in baseball. So can you improve last year's club by 7, 8, 9 wins in the regular season, and then from there go on a playoff run? Yeah, with the addition of those 2 guys, and then factor in Walker Buehler, factor in, what's going to happen, like maybe Liam Hendricks, Aroldis Chapman, and all those guys. Maybe a young guy emerges, and that's the other beauty of this is like you're not relying on any of those guys, but they could join the team and be really good as well. So, yeah, just seeing Bregman and Crochet in a Red Sox uniform and performing right off the rip is great.
Well, and to your point, like Anthony was pretty good in that game yesterday as well. So, right, maybe there's even more on the way. But those are the 2 I would focus on. You can jump in, 617-779-7937. What'd you think of the Bregman and Crochet debuts? What does it do for the Red Sox ceiling? And, early in spring training, it's okay to wonder where this team can go and how far this team can go. So you can jump in on that. The Crochet one to me just flies a little. That's one that when you actually see it, you get a little more excited for. Like the Bregman signing, and we were very excited for the Crochet trade as well. But that happens, right after the winter meetings or at the winter meetings? I'm trying to remember. Towards the tail end of the winter meetings. And you get excited for it. There's no contract extension in place. They hadn't done much else at that point in time. You're kind of waiting for another shoe to drop, another domino to fall. And while you get excited for the trade in the meantime, I don't want to say you forget about it, but you just kind of move on and wait for the next thing. But then you see him take the hill, and you see the stuff, to your point. That's one to me that when you're watching it and seeing the highlights and seeing the power, you're like, oh, right, they got this guy. I think we can all wrap our heads around Bregman, and we know who Bregman is.
Yep.
I wonder how many fans really know a ton about Crochet. They've heard about him. I think they're familiar with, like, his profile. But how many fans have really watched him pitch until he threw on a Red Sox uniform at spring training and punched out 4 guys? Like, I don't know how many fans have actually seen him and watched him and how powerful he is and how big he is.
Yep.
I don't know how many people have seen that.
He was our Hoss of the Week.
That's a good point.
We don't just toss that around
That's
either.
a good point.
Like, he took home the Hoss of the Week a couple of months back. And, Bregman's a finished product. You just hope that he is as good as he's been for the next couple of years, and you know exactly what he is. And as an Astro, there were so many games, Red Sox Astros, whether it be playoffs or regular season. Everybody knows what Bregman is. It's just what position are they going to have him play? That's really where the debate comes in. Crochet is far from a finished product. I mean, last year he was dominant in the first half. Then the second half, he was on a pitch count. And then around the trade deadline is where people really maybe started to hear about him because he had the whole thing about, I'm not going to pitch out of the bullpen. I need an extension.
I
if
won't
I'm going to pitch
unless
for
you give me an
you.
extension.
Like,
Exactly.
oh, what is this guy? But going into this year, they have the future odds. So who's going to win the American League Cy Young Award? Where do you think forget the odds, but like where do you think he ranks on there?
8th?
2nd.
So
he has the second best odds.
Who's won? Just
Tarek Skubal.
Okay,
the guy who won it.
That makes sense.
So the guy who won it was sick, and so Garrett Crochet plus 600. Now maybe some of that is he's on Boston now and whatever, but still, like to have him be right now considered to be a top 2 Cy Young candidate, he is going to make it must watch, must listen every 5th day, which we haven't had here in such a long time. And what a difference that makes when you have a guy like that is electric, and you have to see him, and you're always asking, all right, who's starting tonight? When's Crochet's game? Like that, I think that's what we're going to have this year.
Well, and the quote unquote like stopper, like you go into a funk.
That too.
When you have that, you've lost a couple games in a row, and he takes the hill. You feel pretty good that. Hopefully, I mean, if you have a true ace, you feel pretty good about the losing streak ending there. I mean, that's how you used to feel about,
and also like
for a high-end comp Pedro, but even more recently, that's how you felt about Lester and how you felt about Sale and even David Price to a degree.
And also whenever we get there, and hopefully, fingers crossed, it lines up a couple times this year where instead of Garrett Cole versus Brian Bayo in Yankee Stadium, it's Cole versus Crochet, and like just what a marquee event that could end up being, let alone come playoff time. But you can like really match up a real ace, and if you do get to the playoffs, like your game 1 starter is going to be a real game 1 starter, not all right, who's available, like let's go with Howe.
Right.
Or know the jokes, was it 2 years ago Corey Kluber was the team's opening day starter?
Correct.
Like come on. And like that was so you're starting the year with that. You're like, all right, here we go. Fingers crossed, guys, that this goes well.
That might have been the beginning of the end for Chris Sale.
Yeah.
It might have been the beginning of it. When Corey Kluber's taking the ball on opening day.
Like, what the hell?
Over Chris Sale.
Yeah, this is better.
617-779-7937. You can jump in on this. Twitch chat's already saying extend Garrett Crochet. That's one end of the spectrum.
I agree.
The other one, and I agree with that as well. Like the second they got him, they should have worked on an extension for him.
He won't be cheap.
Text line 617-779-7937. Come on, guys, pump the brakes. It was one spring training game.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, we're not even basing everything off the spring training game. It's just seeing the guy in the uniform and now kind of getting yourself.
There's something to that.
Yes, there is. There definitely is. Even Bregman, like during like team photo day, you're like, all right, that's sweet.
So I really think John Henry, if you can ever get through to him, Warner, Kennedy, like the Red Sox should see the benefit just in that. Yep. Like, oh, we got new guys, and the fan base is hyped about it and excited about it. Like, how long has it been since we even were excited about a guy at spring training and their debut and what they look like? And I literally mean what they look like in a Red Sox uniform. Like
like a new guy?
It's been a while since that. Probably Sale, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
Like, it's probably Sale was the last time you're like, wow, what's that going to look like?
It wasn't Trevor Story for you?
I don't. No. Not for me.
No,
I don't want
to
say for everybody in the fan base, but for me, I'd
for
imagine
Bradford,
it was Sale.
It was Tyler O'Neill, obviously.
Wow.
The gun show.
Barely fit in that jersey. Meanwhile, we have Craig Breslow speaking at Red Sox spring training for the first time. Not for the first time, but for the first time since those comments of Rafael Devers last week and Tristan Casas on top of it. He was asked about Devers and the third base situation. He talked to Sean McAdam at Mass Live. He said, quote, these things tend to have a way of working themselves out.
Traded.
This isn't the first situation where a player's been outspoken about something that they take a lot of pride in, and that's okay. Like I said, they tend to work themselves out. So trying to read into that, like they tend to work themselves out when a guy's like, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to do it. I mean, I'd imagine that's just, we're going to give him time.
Yeah.
He's going to work his way through it.
Cool off. You're still getting $30 million. But
it's going to work itself out where you're now a $30 million a year DH. Like reading between the lines, that's what I think he's saying.
Yeah, I think, and part of that, things work themselves out. They kind of do. Just somebody's going to get hurt along the way too, and like sometimes it's not a decision that you have to make. I know we're talking about Devers here, but like the 6-man rotation, for example, like that might just come down to who's even available. Like right now, all 6 of those guys aren't available to even pitch. Right now, Rafael Devers, who we're talking about, isn't available. So if the season starts, is he going to be your third baseman? Is he going to be your DH? Is he going to be on the active roster? Like all that stuff still has to kind of play itself out.
Has your view on that changed at all? I know last week you were like, I still think Devers is going to be the opening day third baseman. I think Bregman will play the majority of games at third base. Have you changed at all in terms of opening day?
So, no. I think he's still going to be the opening day third baseman, and I think it has as much to do with the uncertainty at second base and then figuring out where Yoshida's going to go at DH. $18.6 million for the next 3 years.
To just eat that on the bench.
To be a pinch hitter. Now, the team paid Rusney Castillo a small fortune to play for Pawtucket and Worcester. So, I mean, I guess it wouldn't be the first. They paid Chris Sale to win the NL Cy Young. So, like, the franchise has eaten money before.
And they should with him.
They probably should, but I wonder if they just say, let's just start it out. And let's see, in the month of April, does Devers field the position average, and does Yoshida hit a little bit? And if that happens, we'll keep it going. But if one of those things doesn't, then like maybe you have to make a change.
That's fair, and that's a way to read those comments too. Like they have a way of working themselves out. We're going to start Devers at third, but when he starts booting balls left and right, and the crowd's booing him, we're going to move him to DH, and
sure.
it will work itself out.
Yeah.
So how do you read that? What do you think of the debuts of Crochet and Bregman? What does it mean for the Red Sox and their ceiling this year? You can jump in 617-779-7937. Still some Bruins phone calls hanging out. Andy is in Hudson. Go ahead, Andy.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, what's up?
Nothing. I think you grossly underestimate what it means to play an original six player and play for an original 16 for your entire career. If he didn't have a cup like Bork, then I think it's becomes maybe an option that he might want to move. But I don't think his legacy has any benefit by moving and getting another cup as it does to be Bruin for the rest of his life.
Andy, you really believe that finishing his career in Boston as a middling player on a middling team, it does more for his legacy than going to, say, Edmonton and winning a cup?
Well, look at his legacy as it started. This was the guy that was a fourth-line scrapper, and he made it up to have serious MVP conversation later in his career and the team captain. I mean, that's a hell of a story.
Yeah, but what if
to stay with one team?
What if the story is you're the guy who puts the Oilers over the cup and like wins a cup for Canada? Like that hasn't. I not to go back to the Four Nations, but like the country hasn't won a cup since '93, and you could be the missing piece on a team like that helps put it over the top. As opposed to just finishing your career with Boston, that does I would imagine that does way more for your legacy. Like, did Jerome? I know it was an original 16, but I mentioned Iginla before. Did Iginla's career get hurt? His legacy get hurt because he bounced around at the end?
So no, I just feel like
would it have been more if he was a career Flame?
I just think it's different now. Like I think all four sports have seen the best players in the world change teams, and I he wants to put emphasis on the original six. I guess that's fine. That's his opinion. Like Tom Brady and Wayne Gretzky and Joe Montana and Peyton Manning and Michael Jordan and, go down the line, these guys change teams. Now, there still are some, and that's really cool. Like, if you want to be, Dirk Nowitzki or Kobe, like, there are examples of guys that have played for one team. And maybe part of Marchand's thinking is Krejci and Bergeron. Like, those are two guys that only played for one team. But, like, Zdeno Chara was the captain. Now, I know he had already played for another team, but he was the captain of the cup-winning team, and then still went and played somewhere else after that.
I also just think, and Marchand was great in that Game 7 up in Vancouver, and he's been a great Bruin for a long time. But that was real early in his career, where Tim Thomas stood on his head.
Yeah, and then he finished his career with not here.
But I don't know, it'd be much more. It almost feels like that team was a hot goalie that went out and won a cup, and the longer you go on, they got back to cup finals, but they could never get over the hump. Like, this would be a way to legitimize the cup you won early in your career. And it wasn't just flash in the pan, good team early behind a hot goalie. Because maybe that's not how we view it in Boston. Yeah. If I didn't live here, that's how I would view that Bruins cup winning team. I'd be like, oh, Tim Thomas got hot and stood on his head and carried the team to a cup. That's kind of what happened.
So I also think Marchand is already a Hall of Famer. Now, I also think Keith Tkachuk should be in. He's not, so who knows?
Classic small Hall guy.
Well, I'm a real small Hall guy. Those are two guys I would have in the Hall of Fame, however. But Marchand, I feel like maybe really solidifies it if he goes somewhere else and wins another cup. Whereas, he's in the team Hall of Fame. He's going to be in the team, I'm sure they raise his number up someday. Like, all the team stuff is already cemented.
Done. He's one of the greatest Bruins of all time.
Right. So now when you talk about, his place in NHL history, maybe another cup run and a big playoff, I think that could really obviously help it.
So you can still jump in on the Bruins, following up on Don Sweeney's comments about the trade deadline. It's going to be a cautious approach at the deadline. What do you want the Bruins to do? What do you think they do? Brad Marchand, obviously, at the heart of that. On the Red Sox, we're talking about some of the debuts for Bregman and Crochet. I mean, just let your mind wander again. How far can this team go? We've talked about them before as contenders. If you think they can win the division, I think that makes you a contender, not just sneaking in on the final weekend on the wild card, which you can win a World Series that way or make a World Series that way.
I think you can.
I wouldn't rule it out, but if you go in looking at this team as a real threat in the division, a team that can win the division, well, then you're a contender that can win a World Series. That's kind of how I view this team right now.
Yeah, so part of me also, it's like, I'm really excited about the season. I also do look back on what missed opportunities they had the last couple of years because I don't think it was going to take a whole lot more to make them a serious threat. And I am definitely of the you get into the playoffs, you're a World Series contender. Like I truly believe that. You look at the 2013 Red Sox, David Ortiz was awesome, and that was about it. And you won a World Series. And like it happens, and maybe you don't always win it, but you might get to the World Series based on having like one pitcher who's hot. Like look at some of those old Giants teams. It was like Madison Bumgarner, Buster Posey, and you're in the World Series.
And nothing else.
But they had like Marco Scutaro, they had like Renteria, they had all these like cast-offs from the Red Sox. Yeah, so like if you get in, you can do it. And the way this is set up, if Garrett Crochet is healthy and you have a guy like that at the top of your rotation, so he gets 2 games every playoff series, and you have a lineup that has at least a couple of guys you can rely on, and I think that they do, then yeah, I really do think sky's the limit. Also, the American League isn't super strong. Well, like who do you love in the American League? Anybody?
And the division's worse.
Well, yeah, I mean, because those 2 teams were 2 of the best teams in the league last year, the Orioles and the Yankees. They've both gotten a little bit worse, in my opinion, while you've gotten a little bit better. You throw in the fact that,
I mean, you made Houston worse, right? You took Bregman from them.
Houston's definitely worse. Detroit was trying to get Bregman, and they didn't get him.
Like, so does Cleveland scare you? Does Kansas City scare you?
Nope.
Detroit was a playoff team a year ago behind Skubal. Like, yeah, no.
So the favorites to win the American League are in this order: Yankees, Astros, Orioles, and then Rangers, Twins, and Red Sox are tied for the same odds. So they essentially are tied for 4th.
But that's lower on the Red Sox than I thought. They're on like the same tier in the same
Rangers,
bucket with
Twins.
like the Rangers.
Yeah,
I know the Rangers were just in a World Series, won a World Series, but yeah, I don't know.
I mean, from missing the playoffs to the last few years to being tied for 4th right now, like I think that's pretty good.
No, I mean that's definitely progress.
Like that's like playoffs. Well, even before they signed Bregman, the odds were that they would make the playoffs were like minus 130 versus not making the playoffs. It was like plus money to not make the playoffs. Like holy crap, that's pretty good. And then you add Bregman, so no, I feel good about it. I don't know why the Yankees are quite as high after losing Soto. Maybe odds makers are pumped about the Max Fried edition because their lineup doesn't do much outside of Judge for me. And then the Orioles got worse. Now they got young studs, and those guys could always take another leap. That's the scary thing about them. Like they have a lot of really good young players, but their rotation's not as good.
They lost a Cy Young candidate and a 40-homer guy.
Yeah,
so
yeah, right. Santander. Yeah,
they lost a good amount. 617-779-7937. That's probably the way to really talk the Red Sox up. The division's worse. The American League is. It seems wide open
for the taking.
Yeah, I mean, there's
for the taking.
There's no Dodgers in your league, so maybe in a World Series, if you're talking that far ahead, like we were talking about with the Celtics before, like maybe once you get to a World Series, that's challenging. Not the Red Sox or the Celtics, but the American League feels wide open. And if you're worried about the Dodgers, that's a good problem to have in a World Series.